Hello guys and welcome to another episode of Air Tycoon Online 3. Today, I've already uploaded another video today, but today we're going to be doing the same thing as usual on routes. And of course, we are going to be using as many shiny new 747s as possible. Now, this person is in a predicament because I can only afford to lease 747s, as is pretty obvious. But I cannot lease that many, so what I'm gonna have to do is, ooh, that sound is really loud. Hold on a second. Is I'm gonna have to do that. Basically, I want to buy cheaper aircraft in order to allow me to use 47s, but at the same time, if I do so and allow myself to use more 747s, I'm gonna lose out in other areas. Because the cheaper aircraft will not perform as well as more expensive ones, which would make more. So I'm gonna have to decide how I decide whether to use more or less 747s because these are massively profitable on the correct route. What I mean by this is if we look at my 747s, look at this. Each half of the stopover, 3.3K here. Each half of this. Oh, this was just replaced last turn, of course. Where else? I know I have some more. I'm bound to have some more 747s, right? But maybe you guys see them and I don't even. Oh, here's another 747. 3.5K on one half, 4.5K on the other half of the stopover. Up here, New York to Napoli, 4.1K on one half of the stopover. So that means my 747s are making massive net profits, which is wonderful, of course. And then also when I do make 747 routes, that opens up, new 707 routes to be made because, of course, I'm replacing 7 aircraft. Now, one thing that is becoming apparent is I am really running out of routes. Meaning instead of buying new 707s, I think I'm going to start buying cargo planes and just expanding into the cargo market because this is what we call saturated. Like some cities left, which I think are probably worth it, like Eindhoven, like these are profitable routes, but honestly, not many routes even as good as to Eindhoven left. I'm really starting to dig into the last available cities that available, really. Like there's not many left. Yeah, like as you can see, I've been really expanding into some of the cities in Europe, which I haven't heard of. There are less cities in Europe in Online 3 than there are in Air Tycoon Online 2. Like notably, there's no Bern. That's one I just noticed, and I'm sure there's plenty of others which I don't remember from previous Air Tycoon, which are missing still. I just don't remember that there's a lot of cities which you only make a few routes to. But I bother to anyway. Now the hub and spoke is really, as you can see, forcing me to make every city imaginable, basically. Unfortunately, I noticed that which is going to be Beijing because it's the city I put the most advertising expense in. It's also the hub of the #1 player, which is frustrating because that means I'm gonna have to really dig deep to find any routes involving Beijing. Like if we take a look at Beijing, which is of course going to be my second home, as I said earlier, of course there are some cities which are not taken. I would be willing to take, but a lot of the better ones have already been taken, which is unfortunate. Warsaw is not been taken, but basically, I'm going to be stuck with just picking up the scraps of the untaken routes. However, this person has overlook the southern hemisphere, meaning I still have routes like Perth, Canberra, Brisbane, not really Christchurch, it's not really good enough, available routes to, which then stop which are relatively close to Beijing, Tashkent, Novosibirsk, whatever. There's not very many routes from Beijing available, But if we take a look at my advertising expenses, there's not. I'm not far after I finish Beijing. Will I be moving on to Chicago? And I'm at 35 now, so I should have that by the end of tomorrow, which is pretty nice. Maybe the day after, I'm not sure. Chicago will follow after, slightly later, and then a day or two, and then I don't really have a plan for after that, which is the problem. Um, right now, I think I'm gonna do it into London. As you can see, I've nearly maxed out investing into London, because no matter what happens, London should last me a while. I think there's more routes available to London than any other city in Air Tycoon Online 3. Um, and then later, even so, I want to move into LA and all the other cities in Asia, which I have, some investing in, but not enough, I think. Where's Guangzhou? As you can see, my investment expense is up to 63K. It is my biggest expense by far. This is all so I can get a new house when the time is right. I'm going to increase my investment in Guangzhou. I will really want to have Guangzhou available to me sooner. Of course, I don't want to my growth as a company too much by increasing um, expense too much. But my company is doing fine. I have 130K net profit now. Without investment expense, of course, it'd be far, far, far higher. But I will continue to keep investing in certain cities, my growth consistent. Looks like Incheon is full, so it's time to start buying slots in the next airport. But yeah, as you can see, this is basically what I've been up to. Is just dominating New York, and I'm not sure what I'm gonna do when I'm done because Beijing seems to be a mistake. Basically, like I'm not gonna be able to find enough routes that come from Beijing to really feel like I make it worth it. And another problem I realize with doing Beijing and Chicago is that they basically compete with each other when I make my stopover routes. When I make my stopover routes, for example, Beijing to Geneva, and then I'll want to stop over from Geneva. Take a look at Geneva, then my only real options are Chicago. I've already done New York, of course, which is not very big, and that sounds fine, Los Angeles. But the problem with that is any slightly further to the east no longer has that option of flying to Los Angeles, so I have to fly to Chicago. So basically, my routes that go from Chicago and my go from Beijing will be competing with each other. So basically, I could have only opened one of them as my main hub instead of both, which would have saved me a vast amount of investment expenses. Now, I don't think it's a big deal because in the long run, of course, I would like to have both Chicago and Beijing. I think Chicago will be because I'll be able to do stopovers. Like, of course, once I exhaust the Beijing to city in Europe to large city in Asia or Beijing to Beijing, like kind of template for a route. Once I've exhausted all those, I'll be able to move on in Chicago to doing routes that stop over starting from a city in Europe to Chicago and then to a city in South America. That's another way I can structure. Why did it tell me? Oh, I don't. Seoul. Shanghai instead. So yeah, there's quite a few stopover routes available from New York, but I'm starting to feel like Beijing was a mistake. I should have done Guangzhou, Seoul, Tokyo, any of the following. The latter would be better than Beijing, mostly because, of course, I discovered that the first place coming off that, but I didn't know that at the time, so it really is. So instead, of course, we will be using Beijing. Just anyway. Another thing I've been considering is buying these used aircraft, but I have no real use for them. The 707 is fantastic, and it's quite cheap, to be honest, for the value of the plane I'm getting. I really should buy them, I don't see why not. They're so much cheaper than a normal 707. But at the same time, I don't have a use for that kind of plane right now because there's no routes available to me. So instead, I will be purchasing 727 freighters, I think. Let me see which one is better. 27 tons for 55K. 35 tons for 80K. Both are garbage. Both are garbage. The 707 is way better. 74K for 38 tons and a faster fly speed. That is just better, period. That's cheaper than 727. More, slightly less fuel efficient, but it flies faster to compensate. So you get more schedules. This is less satisfaction, though, and satisfaction results in your aircraft being full, which would make the 727 full, but far less profitable. Well, this 727 is satisfactory, but this one's very similar. 737, of course, no freighter. That freighter's too big. So I think this is still going to be my go-to freighter. Satisfaction is enough. So I'll order another. And that should allow me to lease another 747. No, okay, I cannot. Can I afford a 747 lease and a Tupolev? No, I cannot. So, just... Can I afford both? No, it does won't be at the end of the turn, yeah. That's a big disadvantage. So I do not, I want, like, the planes you buy from players only get delivered at the end of the turn. So instead of that, I will just buy myself. Oh, I can't even afford a second freighter. That's really sad. That means I'm gonna have to buy buy 727 freighter. That's that is fine. It's not ideal, but like the difference is small. I like to keep the number of aircraft I have small, so when I'm replacing them, I don't get confused about which kind of routes are using which kind of aircraft. It's just a nice thing that keeps you kind of organized when your company starts growing beyond the point of like possibility of maintaining your company in a way that requires micromanaging. Basically, get past the point where micromanaging is even a possibility at some point, and it's nice to have some organization when you get there. So I have a DCA-11. What am I going to use? Let me try and establish a route for a DCA-11. That is 3.0. That's literally impossible. I cannot use that city. Well, I can use... That's still not long enough. The combined range of a Stavor has to be above 10. Oh wait, that is. So I need to find a max range of a, or close to the max range of a DC-11 in Europe, and my computer started lagging for some reason. Recording with OBS, not the easiest on the CPU. Certainly not. So I need to find something that's above 6,500. So I have a very distinct cities to choose from, and it looks like this is the winner. Of course, that city's garbage, but I just need to use the aircraft because I have them, and it's always better to use the aircraft than not to. If you have any kind of like value in your company that's not being used on aircraft or something like that, it's sitting around and not making you money. You know what I mean? Aircraft flying on a route, as long as it's net profitable, is making you money, and that's fantastic. Now, keep in mind when it says net, it does fail to consider all the actual expenses to you. It considers all the expenses of the route, so the slots, the fuel, the maintenance, the aircraft depreciation. It considers all those things into the calculation for your net profit. But what it doesn't consider is expenses that are kind of universal to your company. Alliance expense, the hub expense, whatever the fuck that's supposed to be. What else is there? Let's take a look at our thing. Oh, it doesn't consider your service expense, your service investment expense, and your advertising investment expense, or your branch expense. Almost a third of your expenses are not considered. Okay, maybe let's be more realistic. It's probably more like a quarter. Um, so if we look at our total expense is 360K. Our our expenses that are not related to routes, the branch advertisement and investment, those make up another 85 or so K. So that's about a quarter. So when you gotta considering your net profit, it's actually, for simplicity's sake, let's say about a quarter lower than that, or about a quarter lower than your profit from the. So for example, Monterey to New York, I take a look at the net profit. My net income is 1.7K. My net expense is this. We actually have to take add a quarter to this, so multiply by 1.25 to give us, I'd say, approximately 1.1K as the actual total expense. So if you're not profitable, by a considerable amount, you're probably actually not making money from that route when you consider the other expenses of your company. I'm sorry if you didn't get any of that, because what I just said probably very diluted. Interested on you, and just gotta keep that in mind. Now, so as I said, I was gonna make some cargo routes. So my first one will be Indianapolis, of course, because it has a fantastic business for a city that's not too popular yet, because of course established their hubs in all their cities yet. So people who aren't hubbed in New York have the option, like I do, and of course nobody's hubbing in Indianapolis. Period. I'm sure if it's available as a hub. So where the frick menu did I get into? So let's build this, and I'll make St. Louis my second one. These will be my cargo routes. I'm just planning for them now. Do I have any planes right now? Which ones do I have? I have a DC-811, right? And there's 2 cargo planes on the way. So 4 minutes, and I'll be able to finish off this episode, I guess. So what was my plan for that DC-11? Oh, I'm approaching 100 aircraft. Not bad, not bad. Of course, I wasn't using as expensive aircraft. I could have been there already, which is kind of cool. All my slot requests are new. I'll just say having all your slot requests is basically a must. Without it, it'll take too long to play this game for it to be fun. Also, as you can see, I'm really done New York, basically. I don't think after this I'll be able to find more than 10 new routes for New York that involve passengers. I think once the super long range planes, it'll probably add actually another 25 or 30. But in this range category, I do not think I'll be able to find many more routes. Like, I am thorough. I check all these cities, even, but none of them are viable. The ones which are in range. I'm waiting to open an airport because that looks pretty good. I'm also waiting for Moulton to open it because that city looks pretty good once again. Yeah, basically, the hub and spoke system is too slow. As I thought, I have since had just 1 away from max investment expense. If we look here, nope, that's the wrong tab. I think I'm in the wrong. Yeah, here we are. Since nearly the very beginning, I've had near max investment expense in Beijing and Chicago because I could foresee this happening after the first tick that I tried using advertising / investment expenses. Is Chicago going down? Okay, I'm gonna have to be careful of that, make sure it's not going down. But from the very first turn, I have been investing at 1 from full or 2 from full for Beijing. And I'm at 35 name value. So that doesn't seem like a problem, but that's been 3, like, maybe 4, can't remember now. But my New York, what am I left to do? Like, I have cargo routes, but I have no doubt by the end of tomorrow I will have made almost all the viable cargo routes. This is basically all the viable passenger routes. Of course, there's some smaller routes which are viable. But of course, smaller routes are a pain to make and are very unprofitable. If we take a look at my 737-100, by far my best range aircraft. Wait, don't look at that route. Actually, that's not a fair comparison because that route was just made. Kansas City. It's a fair route, 1.3K. Very mediocre. A plane which costs 50% more can make twice as much. So really, why bother? For example, my 707 320Bs make twice as much and only cost just over 50% more. So short range routes are garbage, basically. So we're forced to use them though because we literally ran out of all other routes possible. That is the state of Air Tycoon. If you know how to grow your company quickly, is you outgrow the possibility for the need for hubs. But like you need new hubs so badly because you exploit every single route possible for one hub so quickly. Basically. So I know it's sounding like a so do not take that away from me. But basically, you need to be able to open a hub immediately whenever but the passengers you get should actually scale off the higher name value, the more passengers generated. And I wouldn't mind if they were pretty punishing for, like, for example, if I opened a new hub in Paris and I had 0 name value, it would generate like just hundreds of passengers on a large aircraft in a month, and you would lose a ton of money. That would be pretty cool. But then if you'd open 10, 20, 30 routes there and max out your investment expense, you'd get like 10 name value every turn. Like, because there's so many routes and you're paying so much investment, I feel like it'd be fair if they rewarded you by actually allowing the name value to grow quickly. If you invested enough, probably at a loss. I wouldn't mind that. I mispriced something. Hold on. This is what this should be. What not? Okay, yes, that's max. Okay, wait, that's correct. And this was wrong. This should be this. So yeah, what was I saying? Basically, you need to be able to open more new hubs quickly. So it's actually for you to not be stuck in one city. It's actually pretty frustrating, like right now, that I'm having a lot of fun because this is a new Tycoon Online game, and I love Air Tycoon Online. But so much better, superior for the game and for the players if they just allowed you to open new hubs more quickly. I mean, somebody who didn't plan out how they're going to play this game would only be able to open a new hub every 5 days. They're not going to be able to get that many hubs by the end of the game anyway. And most people don't even want that many hubs for some reason. But for somebody like me, I'd like to make every city my hub. Like every major city will eventually be my hub by probably during like the mid 70s at around is the time to start investing, if my company allows it, in basically every single possible large city that I can foresee myself using, basically. I guess you could argue that I should be doing the heavy investment now, where, relatively speaking, my profit margin is pretty good, but I'm not for a very specific reason, and that is the size of your company grows exponentially. So chipping off the beginning of that curve is a lot more punishing than chipping off the middle of the curve as a percentage. So your investment expense starts off as a very low amount. And even if you don't make any new routes to said cities, aka, for example, Beijing, your investment expense will go up, scaling with the size of your company. Now, logically speaking, then, you should want to do your investment earlier into your world, because your company is smaller, your total investment expense is lower, therefore you won't lose as much value from doing it earlier. But I don't think that's true, because if you chip off at the beginning of your exponential curve, you're not going to get to a high point as quickly. Whereas if you chip off the middle, you're not losing nearly as much. And that's why I think I'm going to be doing the majority of my investment in the mid 70s, because that's kind of when I've already reaped the advantages of growing quickly early on. And then I can kind of just, you know, at that point, I can foresee my profit. Maybe late 1970s, because this game is a bit slower than Air Tycoon Online 2. By late 70s, I can imagine that my net profit will be high enough so that I cannot possibly make new routes fast enough, in which case I wouldn't mind cutting it down to a near loss by using so many advertising expenses. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was very long. I spent most of it talking about probably pretty boring stuff. But I hope you guys enjoyed anyway, and I will see you guys next time.